to The Collective, where every conversation ignites a new perspective. Join us as we delve into the journeys of remarkable individuals, explore the art of growth, resilience, and the power of a shared mission. This is your gateway to insights and inspiration as we strive to be better together. Hey, everybody. Welcome back to The Collective. We have another fantastic show for you planned out today. We got Alana here. We got Yohance coming in here as well. He'll be a little bit late, so he'll be jumping in on the fly, and I am stoked for this conversation. So now, while I'm stoked, y'all should be too. Like the show, subscribe to the channel, hit the notification bell, do all the good stuff. Get your emails whenever we go live. Of course, Fridays for The Collective and Wednesdays for The Gold Mine. We can get into some intros right away, and then we'll dive into the convo. Alana, good to see you again, first off. And
I'm loving the new intro. That's very cool.
She showed us, oh, thank you. She showed me earlier her backdrop right now, which is, it's an okay view. It's just a little bit okay. Look at that. Dang. So, Alana, why don't you give us a quick 10 to 15 seconds? Who are you, where you come from, all that good stuff, and then we can dive into the convo.
Yeah, Alana Stott. I'm from Scotland, living in California. What am I? I am now president of the Blue Rose Foundation. That's my latest venture, which is my human trafficking organization. Still working quite deeply within the security world too, so doing a lot more OSINT stuff, but mainly working around the human trafficking side. I am obviously author of 5 books, and I've just completed our first movie, which is hopefully going to be coming out this year, called Fuego. And mom of 3, married to Dean Stott. There I am.
Bam. So not that big. You got 1 or 2 projects on the go. It's like you're not doing too much. Shaun, how's the mountains treating you?
Now I feel like I've got to do something extraordinary today.
I think we all do. And I think that's what we're going to be talking about today anyway, is seizing the day. And the reason I got this started, I was actually just scrolling through Instagram one day, yesterday, and I saw just one big post and it just said Carpe Diem. And I was just like, seizing the day. Like, I haven't really thought about that in a while. And I wanted to get your guys' thoughts on it as well. And I thought it'd be a great topic. And I wanted to just right off the bat, what does it mean to you to seize the day? Alana, what do you got?
It's probably something that I've lived by my whole life, and I think we've spoken about this before. You know, like my mom passing away when she was 37, it felt like she'd missed out on so much life, and she'd raised me, she'd raised my brothers, not really lived much of a life herself past having the kids, and then to lose life at 37. So I've always had that feeling that life is just super short and it can leave you at any minute. So I pretty much live my life by those exact standards, which actually can be a hindrance sometimes when you want to just have a duvet day or just chill out on the sofa and watch movies and do nothing. But then I married somebody with that exact same focus in life, so we'll both be sitting there and we could be doing something here. There's things that we should be doing, so it's almost like we've got to force that settle down part. But it's how I live my life, so it's a good topic.
I love it. Shaun, what are your first thoughts on this?
Well, I did cheat a little bit this morning. I jumped into it with the robots and had a quick combo with them about Carpe Diem. And I just wanted to get some historical context. Because, I mean, we all throw the idea around Carpe Diem. Where did it come from? And every once in a while, someone will come up with the historical origination of it. And that's cool. And then, you're forgotten by tomorrow. But I think what I'm going to say today will make it sink in a little bit more for some people anyway. So here's my notes. Carpe Diem, seize the day. It was written by Horace. He's a Roman poet and appeared in his book, Odes, which was written in 23 BCE. The full quote is this: Carpe diem, quam minimum credula postero. Here's where it gets interesting. Seize the day, putting as little trust as possible in the future. Do you ever hear that one? Do you ever hear it? Do you ever hear that last part of the sentence?
No, I can't think so.
Now, bear with me because I've got just one more training aid. I pulled up a little bit of a little piece here. It's going to take me about 30 seconds to read, but I believe this is where Carpe Diem became famous, because it wasn't Horace. That dude wasn't famous. I mean, no one remembers him. They just remember Carpe Diem. Why is it in the public mind? Why is it in our culture? Certainly in North America anyway. I think it's this. So the phrase Carpe Diem gained significant attention in modern times, especially after the 1989 film Dead Poets Society, where the character played by Robin Williams delivers a powerful monologue urging students to seize the day. This emotional and iconic moment cemented Carpe Diem in popular culture. I'll go on. In the film, the character, John Keating, portrayed by Robin Williams, delivers a poignant monologue emphasizing the importance of poetry in the human existence. He quotes Walt Whitman to inspire his students to seize the day and contribute their own verse to life. The monologue includes the following lines. Here we go. To quote from Whitman, "O me, O life, of the questions of these recurring, of the endless trains of the faithless, of cities filled with the foolish, what good amid these, O me, O life?" The answer, that you are here, that life exists, an identity, that the powerful play goes on, and you may contribute a verse. Now directly to the Carpe Diem piece in the movie. And this is where it gets interesting to me anyway. Because we are food for worms, lads. Because, believe it or not, each and every one of us in this room is one day going to stop breathing, turn cold, and die. He then directs the student's attention to the school's trophy case filled with photographs of past students. And he says, "They're not that different from you, are they? Same haircuts, full of hormones, just like you. Invincible, just like you feel. The world is their oyster. They believe they're destined for great things, just like many of you. Their eyes are full of hope, just like you. Did they wait until it was too late to make their lives even one iota of what they were capable? Because you see, gentlemen, these boys are now fertilizing daffodils." He encouraged the students to listen closely as he leaned forward, and he whispered, "Carpe." Hear it? Carpe. Carpe diem. Seize the day, boys. Make your lives extraordinary. And then the scene ends. He leaves them hanging. And of course, the movie moves on. But the focus is always on the carpe diem. It's always on seize the moment. But the rest of the sentence never gets said in the public mind. Don't focus on the future. And that is critical to the completion of the sentence. You can seize the day all day long while still dreaming of the future that you want. That Maserati that one day you're going to get, that Ferrari that you're going to park next to the Maserati in your mansion. And so as humans, we seize less of the day in our modern world because we're spending so much time seizing the future that we want so desperately.
This is a real. I didn't think we were going to go here, but I love this already. I love the point. The initial part of the quote was no trust in the future, and to not put any trust in the future, but still have to plan for the future is an interesting paradox, an interesting line. Alana, you got any thoughts on this so far?
Yeah, I think I was picking up from my limited Latin knowledge. I done 5 years of Latin, so I should have a bit more than that. But it's what we get told a lot, isn't it? Living in the present. We've got to put our feet firmly on the ground and know where we are right now. But how do you do that? Especially as you grow and you get family and you need to prepare for them. And I actually was thinking about it when I was doing some research recently in my ancestors. I ended up going down a bit of a rabbit hole, which I often dive down, and I was learning about my family and who they were, and I went all the way back to my 42nd grandmother, who was a saint apparently. So I was learning about a few different histories through it, and I thought like they didn't have the plan for what my life was going to be like. They weren't living their life planning on how their 42nd granddaughter was going to turn out and what she was going to do. Just like that, I can't prepare for what my 3 kids are going to do, and already I see they're going to do very, very different things. And it's not my job to prepare them. It's not my job to tell them what. I can guide them, I can give them advice, I can give them, but that's their future. I'll get to watch it, hopefully I'll get to see them, but it's all within them. But I think that the energy that we're putting out right now is kind of what's preparing us for the future, and how are we working on those energy exchanges between what our ancestors prepared for us, what our futures got for us, but everything that we're doing right in this very minute is what's prepared. So if you want that Ferrari, if you want that Maserati, if that's the kind of energy you want to work with, then you still have to be in the present to do that next stage, if that makes sense.
I'm digging this. My brain keeps going back and forth in these things, because in order to get the things that you want, say that Maserati, same that lifestyle, you're going to have to plan for it, because there's no way that's just going to drop into your lap. And I think if we get too focused on the now, on either what we want or what we desire right now, we lose sight of what's in the future, and we start to just allow things to go. I know a lot of people in the world who are just kind of like, see what the universe brings me, and then kind of move along with it, versus actively work towards something else, which is, it's an interesting conundrum. And while I'm on that note, I got somebody right here. Hanse, how's it going, buddy? Jumped in right at the last second here. We're talking about seizing the day, and I'm going to hand the mic over to Shaun here in a second, and then we can you can jump in on the combo so you have an understanding where we are, where we're at. Shaun, got any thoughts?
I do. So I do want to focus on the last piece of that sentence again. So the first piece of the Latin quote is seize the day. And then it follows on with putting as little trust as possible in the future. And so, Chance, you've just mentioned it, and Alana has been touching on it as well. We do kind of have to think about the future to some degree, but we don't have to trust the future. We can think about it, just not trust the future. And I feel that, like using Alana's comment about how we spend our time, if we're putting our energy into the present time, let's think of ourselves as a bank. Are you investing all of your bank's worth into the present moment, or are you investing all of your present worth into the future? In other words, are you spending your intellectual money, your hope money, your dream money, your action money? Is that all being spent? Is it all being invested in your future through your dreams? So action in a mind can be plotting and scheming and dreaming and living in that Maserati lifestyle life, rather than investing your bank's energy into the present moment. So as a good bank, you've got to maintain your capital in the present while investing some capital into the future as an investment. But how much are you an investment banker? How well do you invest? Do you have a track record of visualizing the future, spending some capital in your future to create outcomes in the present? And if you aren't a good investment banker, if you haven't played the game a long time of thinking forward and making it happen and realizing how it's done, then you're just spending money blindly. I think money, your life energy, should be spent right now in the present. Seize this day. Once you own this day, then you can start expending capital into the future like an investment banker. Don't start life as an investment banker. Start life as a small banker in your little hometown life, where you put all your money into the day, into your local life, rather than investing it on massive capital expenditures in dream world.
Hanse, you got any thoughts? Oh, you're muted there, bud.
First things first, can you hear me? All right. I mean, just hopping in on it. So it's talking about seizing the day for me. I mean, this is actually what I posted about this morning. And so I'll just kind of hit that is in a different sense for me, being here now, being present is a thing that escapes you from suffering, right? Suffering is anticipation of future pain, right? That's one of those things where you're I'm gonna be. This is gonna suck. This is gonna be terrible. I'm still gonna be in pain tomorrow. I was in pain yesterday, and so when you're in pain now, that's all it is. It's just pain. It's not suffering. And so it's easier to deal with. And it's also for happiness. It's also for whatever it is. So, there's a quote in The Alchemist where the guy talks about the fact that, like, when I'm marching, all I worry about is marching. I eat food. He's like, I'm always happy when I'm marching because when I'm doing it, that's all I can think about. I can't think about the future. I can't think about the past or anything else. So for me, a lot of like seize the day comes down to that, especially for the kind of coaching and stuff that I deal with and do with a lot of, especially the young men, man, it just comes down to like, hey man, like you're too far out. Like I need you here. You can have a future plan. We can even have some things that we don't want to repeat, but all the action happens now. I need you to pull levers today.
Like front sight focus. You don't want to get too focused on the target downrange. You want to be sighted on something right in front of you. I like that. Like that thought. Alana, you got anything to add on this?
Yeah, I like that, and I'd probably come to a quote that we use a lot would be, "Anticipation is worse than participation." It's a jump right in thing, and you could sit there and procrastinate over it and think about it all the time, but just do it. It's if it hurts, but it's going to hurt more thinking about it. And I'd probably slightly, not often do this, but slightly disagree with Shaun on the building the small bank. I think I've always thought more of you do still have to focus on the local town, and it's all right helping the local town, but if you want that giant investment bank, you've got to almost think in that nature. I think that being very, very present in where you are right now is great, and building up on what you've got right now. But I think thinking of yourself as that greater figure, because I think that's where a lot of people are kind of struggling right now with that whole imposter syndrome. Am I good enough? Can I do this? Is it big enough? But it's trying to find that little balance in between. Like, don't box yourself into this small town mentality. I can't get any bigger than this. This is what I'm meant to be. This is where I'm from. This is, I shouldn't put my head up too far. To like, okay, but don't get too big for your boots. Do the work, put the grind in. I think that having the big dreams is definitely something. I'm always like, yeah, what do you want? What and then Bill, I'm going to go back and forth here, but going around what it is, like you've got the Maserati mindset, you want the Maserati, but how has that Maserati come about? Like, you could do this very, very easily. You could go and, do something illegal and sell drugs, or do something that could make that money super fast. Or are you driving that Maserati knowing that you've changed something in the world, you've made something better, you've built what you wanted to build, you've got that legacy for the future, you've given back at the same time. So you're comfortably getting into that car going, yeah, I've done it all exactly how I wanted to do it. So it's the blend, I would say. It's the blend of everything.
I'm you made me think of something really quick here while you're going over it, was the difference between a dream and a tangible, right? Like if you want a Maserati, why do you want a Maserati? What is it about the Maserati that you want? Is it the lifestyle? Is it the look of it? Is it you want to impress other people? Is it the fact that you really love Maseratis and there's a history there and you like the engine build? Like, why do you want that particular dream to begin with? And I don't think that gets thought enough of. And I've only been doing it for a couple of years now, since Shaun like poked me pretty hard a couple of times to get me to start thinking about my why. But do you think that might be a barrier for a lot of people in their seizing of the day, is the fact that there's a dream versus an actual tangible that they're going to be seeking after? Hanse, you got a thought on this?
A couple, man. So I'll say this. I always tell people I am firmly delusional, but I just try to support my delusions. right? That's the thing I've always tried to run with, and I also kind of how I coach people. But even then, I think getting down to brass tacks, like what you really want, right? So it's a difference between telling somebody like I want to be an author versus I want to be a best-selling author, right? And so there's that, and then we start talking even more as far as like the why, right? Like I think whys get real weird because if we're really honest, right, a lot of people that we'll call high performers or successful were people who are missing something, right? There's like I don't remember who said it, but at the end of the day, people who are missing something, they're usually driving towards one thing and they got something chasing them. It's not just either or, it's usually both, right? I'm going to prove you wrong from whatever happened to me when I was 12. Plus, I want the Maserati on the backside, which kind of circles back to because I want to prove you wrong. Right. And so I think those two things kind of play together, but they also change, right? Like my desires and why now are completely different. Whereas, originally they were wild and I don't want to say materialistic, but they were just other things, right? Whereas now they're more like um it's Eli, right? For me, everything boils down to Eli. Like what does 85-year-old me look like? What does he say? What does he want? How did he get to this life where he's like, I'm good, man. I just want to hang with my kids, right? Because that's my goal is to be exhausted. My goal is to be exhausted. And when hopefully my oldest boy, if I get the opportunity, comes to me, says, Dad, do you want to do anything else? And I'm like, we did it all. Right. And so I think those kind of things all play into it. But as far as like what Shaun said, I get it because I also will say this. I don't think people romanticize or make the small things sexy enough. Right. Like anybody who's been a part of a special operations unit or anybody who's done any type of sporting at a high level or whatever, it's basics. What made George St. Pierre so great? He had a great jab and he had a great double leg. Nothing about that is fancy. At the end of the day, could he do some fancy stuff? Yes. But those were the two basic skills that he really honed in on. Right. And that's the same thing for a lot of these things. And so we forget because, the highlight reel or whatever you want to call it, and people forget and they start getting rooted in something else when I think the best of us in a way, you find those things really attractive. Right. It's something I to this day, there's something about 5:30 in the morning that I love. I'll never not love it. Right. Even the days where I'm just like, oh, I just want to stay. But there's that little piece of me that goes, it's just the way I tell people is like, there's a little soundtrack to the world that you can only hear at 5:30.
That's a
Right.
good point.
So.
Good point. I'm not that. I don't really like 5:30 in the morning. It's a requirement if I need to use it. But I've never been a morning person. I really do love at like 02:30. That's a great time for me. I'm a night hawk, so when I'm up at night and everyone else is asleep and the stars are shining and it's a beautiful time of the day, and it is something that you get to be a part of, right? You're one of few people who are out at that time, and you get to be a part of it. I actually used to really like it when we'd have really massive snow days, and it would be -40, be super cold, and the snow would be super deep, and I would be out there in a heartbeat because no one else was there, and it was just little pieces of time. I love that. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. So, Alana, thank you for pushing back. One of my jobs over here is to create a little bit of turbulence. And so you're right. And it's not that I was wrong. It's just that you're right. And so I think that we can all look at this through a bunch of different lenses. And Chance, you went on to say that, if you focus too much on the front sight, you miss what's downrange. If you focus downrange, you miss the front sight. But you know how it works. If you've been in that game long enough, you see it all. Actually, the sight just disappears. You don't even know you've got a weapon in your hand, but you do. You just look where you want the holes to appear, and they appear. And so, with enough time, all of the beginner markers, all of the metrics that you consider as, oh, I've got to see a front sight in order to ... With time, the front sight of life disappears, and you see more of what life is about, as it were. And so the reason I'm mentioning that is because all of us, every single person on this panel, I'll speak for the panel, I'm pretty sure, all of us at some point in our young lives could barely see the front sight. And forget about the forest. We didn't even know there was one. We were just clinging to the idea that there was a front sight. And so it doesn't matter how old you were or what you were fixated on at the time. Maybe you were 7 and you wanted a thing. Well, you can barely see the front sight. You learn over time to see the front sight. And then over time, you learn to make the front sight disappear. And so if you want to get better at life, it is a balance between seeing the forest and the front sight until you start to make the front sight disappear and you simply accept the forest as information. And that takes a long time to figure out. But the people who are in the game, any industry, if they're in that game long enough, things become visible that weren't visible when you first started out the thing. Now, I'm going to refer directly to Alana. At some point in her, at that point, wasn't even a tangible trajectory for her. She got it in her head that she was going to try to help with human trafficking. And that seed, that thought, came from somewhere. Inspired by it, read it, heard it, was walking through her kitchen with a coffee, and then bam, like a lightning bolt, it hit her. It doesn't matter where it came from. 1 millisecond, it wasn't there. And the next millisecond, it was there as a thought. Thoughts fly through our heads all day, every day, all life. It's what we do with the thoughts. Do we let them pass by, or are we inspired by the thought? Well, Alana was inspired by a thought called, I wonder if I can be helpful within human trafficking. And now here she is, years later, subject matter expert. In fact, when we were in the green room before we came into this conversation, Chance and I were both shrugging our shoulders saying, it's a topic we have to hit, but neither of us are subject matter experts. In fact, I know next to nothing about it, but Alana does. And that is the game of life. The thought, the inspiration, but then the action. That was Alana seizing the day, seizing her life, in a sense. The more you seize the day, the more it becomes part of your life. Now, Alana might not recognize it in herself at the moment, but at some point in her life, human trafficking became central to her life. She may have a few pillars, family, business, but there's human trafficking in there somewhere as well. And that is how a life well lived starts to show up. The idea that then goes into a passionate seed that then becomes a thing that many years later starts to frickin' define us. And so if you seize the day, carpe diem, in that thoughtful moment, I'm not saying be careful what you're seizing on the regular, just be thoughtful about what you're seizing. Because on that random Tuesday that the idea springs into your mind, you might be looking at a random moment that becomes a thoughtful life 17 years later in a way that you had no idea it was going to turn into. And so carpe diem is a great, powerful statement, but it also kind of comes with a rider, with a provision. And that is seize, but know why you're seizing. And if you're seizing, have the conviction to realize that you're seizing it for a long time, not just for that second.
Alana, you got any thoughts on that?
He goes deep, doesn't he?
He has a habit of doing that, yeah.
I think that's really, I think the last part that I was getting from him there, that and I'm like the world's worst at it. I'll take everything. I'll take every little seed and I'll be like, I'm going to run with this and see where it goes and see what. And yeah, and Shaun's probably right. It always comes back to the thing I'm passionate about, and that's maybe just the way that the universe and the energy works around these things that are put towards you. But I do think that there's certain things that come towards you that have an element of darkness around them that are maybe trying to stop you from the thing that you're meant to actually be doing. There's something in there that you're meant to be doing, and there's maybe things that are going to try and stop you or become a distraction or try and get in the way of that building. And that might be, I'm saying it in the darkness way because of the field that I work in, but it might just be your own little subconscious trying to create a procrastination because there is a bit of a hard road to come up to. So I think maybe athletes or maybe not athletes, but somebody that wants to run a marathon, no matter who you are, if you're training for an Ironman or training for a marathon, the excuses will come at you on the daily. Like every single day, there'll be a reason why not to do it. Why not to get up at 5:30? Why not to do those things? But it's going to be up to you how much you want that thing that's ahead of you. And again, how do you take all those different things? Chance, you like to sit up till 2:30. Yeah, if you like to get up at 5:30, if you like, if it's your choice or not, I was up at 4 for my baby decided that was the time she was getting up today. So there are going to be different reasons, but how you use that. She got up at 4, so I was like, okay, I'm up at 4 now. What am I going to do? So the laptop was up and I was working on the things, and it was great because nobody else is up, so they can't reply to me, and I can get on with the things that I need to get on with. But I guess so I was thinking about there while you were talking, when I used to do door-to-door sales when I was about 14, and I would have to walk around knocking on these doors in the middle of Scotland in the middle of winter, and it was cold and it was horrible. And if you didn't sell, you didn't eat that day. So, but I used to be really, really jealous. I remember knocking, say, 8:30 at night in the middle of winter, and I'd be watching this family eating their fish and chips in this warm house, watching TV. And I used to get really jealous, and it wasn't that it was a family eating fish and chips and watching TV. It was how content they were, how happy they were, just sat there on a Friday night eating fish and chips, watching TV. And I just never had that in me. I was always thinking about the next thing I've got to do. How do I get the constant hustle? And I thought, I wonder if I'll ever get to that stage where I'm just content, just sitting down, doing nothing, and just having that regular routine. And it's never hit me yet. And actually, sometimes I hear people say, the dream is just to be on the beach with margaritas, and that kills me. I'm like, that is like the furthest from my dream that I could ever imagine. I'd be like, right, what am I doing? What am I missing? What have I got to? And maybe one day I could get to that stage where I could be, I'm exhausted and I'm 83 years old and I'm good to just sit there and do nothing. But right now, I don't feel like that's coming anytime soon. And I'm probably off track as to where we were there, but that was all the feelings that I just got there from Shaun's conversation.
I love it. The fun part about it is understanding those moments and realizing what they are. I think a lot of people, to your point, Alana, they're sitting in front of the TV, they're hanging with their family, they're doing whatever, but they're not really there. They're off somewhere else. They're off in their own heads doing their own things, or they're immersed by the TV or whatever. And there's been a few times that I've had to catch myself and really appreciate a moment where, my kids are around the table and they're laughing with my wife and everyone's having a great time and enjoying that moment, and everybody's eating, and I don't have to worry about, all the other extraneous stuff when you got kids at the table. But we forget to take those moments in. They happen. And then later on we look back and go, oh yeah, that was a nice moment. But sometimes we look back on it. Sometimes we don't. But what do you got, Shaun?
Real quick, Alana, when you would be stepping in at 14 years of age and, Scotland in winter, oof. And so you're in the house, it's warm, maybe it's a fire, whatever the case is, you're smelling the fish and chips. And as you look in, there's 2 words in that moment. There is content and there's comfort. And often it is not both. It's one or the other. And so I can be content if I'm not around too much comfort. And so if I get too much comfort, I'm not content, is the way to say it for me. And so that family could have been comfortable, extra malt, vinegar, and salt on the fish and chips. That's bringing more comfort. But were they content? Were they content within themselves? Were they content as a family? Were they content about their life choices leading up to that and what they envision for themselves in the future? We can all embrace comfort, but that doesn't mean we're embracing content.
That's a fantastic point. Hansa, you got any thoughts on that?
Man, that's I think I kind of I probably operate in the same fashion, right? Like comfort. Well, here's I guess here we go. Since leaving the military, comfort's become more of a premium for me, right? But that is checkered with a lot of moments of discomfort, right? I purposely do a lot of things that are uncomfortable and crazy and ridiculous, usually to kind of see what or who I become on the backside, right? That's the most important part of it to me. One of the things I kind of realized last year is like 90% of the things that I've done have been less about a medal or a finishing or a picture. It's been more about like the difference in who I am at the end. So that's that. But as far as comfort and content, I think one of the biggest problems in the world is people can't find contentment. They think that happiness is supposed to be where they live. And so I often describe it as like you only get visas to Happy Town. No one lives there. Right? You can get extended visas, you can get long ones, but I don't think anyone lives there. And one of the things I look at that is with my father. My father's one of these guys, man. Like when people meet him, they're like, "How is he like that?" And then you talk to him, he's just content. It just so happens that contentment breeds his ability to be happy on a regular basis. And so, that's kind of how I look at contentment. It's just like content is just the ability to be like, I'm cool. Everything's okay, right? There's a quote, I can't remember who said it, and I'll probably butcher it, but the gist of it is like guy goes up to the master and says, "Hey, what's your secret?" And turns out the master's like, "The secret is I don't mind what happens." And that's something I've really tried to like embrace in the last 2 years. And then to kind of circle back to something real quick, you said about being in the moment and noticing moments. This is something that has become really passionate for me, right? Because I've had that experience where like a moment passes and then you go back and you're like, man, that was really cool. And in the last 2 years, I spent a lot of time trying to be present. Here goes talking about being here now again. And so now being able to know the moment when you're in it, it's a really cool sensation and feeling, right? Like, I mean, everything from work to hanging out to like climb the mountain last year, a couple mountains last year. And I'm sitting on top of this mountain and I go, oh man, we're in it. Like it's happening. And then so now what I started doing is trying to cement them into my head with like other things like music, smells. I really sit down. It's almost like Sills. I'm doing Sills all over again, right? I'm closing my eyes, stop, look, listen, smell. I'm taking in the environment because I want to remember everything. I want to think of everything. I want to hear the kids laughing in the background. I want to hear the tourists that pass me on the right, And so that's one of the things that if I could advertise to people and say like, here's a way to contentment, here's a way to happiness, here's a way to really punctuate your life, is like if you can be in the moment and like really recognize when you have these experiences and moments, right? Because I think at the end of the day, in my opinion, the people that I want to hang out with and be around, they're after experiences and moments. They're not after material. They're not after, you want that feeling of, like it's really cool. Like today I had this thing, made me cry like a baby too. Let me be honest. I had this thing today where I was like, this memory of me and everybody that I've ever lost on top of a mountain, just hanging out. And I was like, if I could have that moment. And you can never have that moment. But so I think the purpose in doing that is that now when I am with people, when I see Shaun for the first time in person, when I see Big Bird for the first time in person, I slow down and I go, oh yeah, this is what it is. This is a moment. This is an experience. And you only get these one time. There's only one introduction, right? There's only one, that night. And I think people often like, it's really easy to get lost in the moment, and not in the moment. It's really easy to get lost in life and like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What about this? What about that? What bills didn't I pay? And then to be able to just go, oh shit, like, excuse me, I know, my bad. But to be able to go like, oh my God, like this thing is important, And so, and I'll end it like this, because I talked about this today earlier as well. In my journal, every journal I start with this saying. Turns out it's not true. It's not a real thing. Hoka hey, right? It's a good day to die. People used to say it was a Native American phrase. Turns out I did the research. I researched it. Not real. Never said it. However, it's still a good reference. And when I first heard it, I thought it was like this dirty, hairy, like Clint Eastwood. It's a good day to die. Like pull out your 38 special. But no, what it is it's the idea that at the beginning of the day and at the end of the day, if everything ended, would everybody know everything is right? Right? Do your loved ones know that they're loved? Do the people know that you care? Did you fix the problem? Did you attempt to fix the problem? And so I think that those are things that kind of like, it's a big circle. It goes, you start there and you end there.
Yeah.
So,
yeah, I was just thinking about this a little while ago. Actually, I had a really good day with the family. I had a good podcast, had great training with jiu-jitsu, all these things. And then I was laying in bed that night and I was like, if I didn't wake up tomorrow, I could be content with that day. Like that's a good check. I'm good. Okay, this is a good time. I think it's a great point, a great thing to kind of engage in just regularly, to think about it. Are you okay going tomorrow? Because it, like we were saying earlier, you can't trust that the future is going to happen. That you might just go to sleep and that might just be it. So, Alana, you got any thoughts on comfort versus? I just forgot the word, but what Shaun was talking about.
Contentment.
Contentment. Thank you.
Yeah, I would just go to that point of I hear a lot about it, and I don't know, maybe if it's a female thing. I mean, I do hear it amongst the men group, but definitely amongst a female group of people. As they get older, it's always like taken as like a negative thing. Oh, I'm getting so old. I'm aging. I'm in my 40s. I'm in my 50s, and I'm like, yes, that's a blessing. Like, and every single day that you get to that next stage that you're waking up, and as long as you can say, yeah, I'm living it to the full. I'm doing everything that I said I'm going to do. Like some days you might not do as much, and some days there might be a little bit less, or there might be bad stuff happening. But if you're getting that opportunity to wake up every day and keep going, like the day that you turn 50, you should be like, yes, I'm 50. I've made it here. Like, what's next? Where am I going? I was speaking with a friend the other day, and she was saying about it was her 62nd birthday. And we went out for dinner, and there were 6 of us out, and I definitely won't name drop, but the one of the people that were there was probably one of my childhood heroes. And like, if I'd said to little Alana, like, one day you'll be sat in Hollywood sitting with that person having dinner, like I would have blown myself away. But I was there, and I was enjoying the moment. And we went home afterwards, and I was speaking to her. She's 62, and she was like, I don't feel 62. 62, it's just a number. She was like, I feel fit, I feel healthy, I'm out doing my thing, I'm living life. And she was like, and I hear all these other people just complaining about aging, and their skin aging, their hair aging, their body aging. And she was like, I don't feel like that. And I feel like they're almost convincing themselves that that's the way that they're getting, and that's how they're feeling, and it's how they're meant to feel at that age. I always remember my Auntie Molly. She lived till she was 96, and you know, she used to do like the grocery shopping for all the old ladies around her. The old ladies were in their 70s, and she's 90 years old doing their grocery shopping. Every day she got up, she put her makeup on, she ironed her clothes, she done her mile walk, like till the day she died. She still was doing all those things, and she lived her life how she felt on that day. And she didn't convince herself she was too old. She didn't convince herself it was passing. But there's a movie that we watch at home, Inside Out. It's a kids movie. If you've ever seen it, and it's the core memories, and then there's the little emotions in there, like putting all the little memories in and doing all the things. Have you all seen that? I'm hoping you have. If you haven't, you need to watch it. But me and Dean talk about that all the time now, and it's almost our way of bringing ourselves to the present. We're like, this could be a core memory. Are we building where's this little bubble going? Is it going into the core, or is it going to be one of the forgotten ones? What do we want to build it? And it almost just allows us to come back in and go, no, this is a good moment to be really present and really remember that the 5 of us are here, the kids are smiling, everyone's laughing, the food smells good. Because it is hard when you're at a million miles an hour. And we had to, I think we were speaking to Mark Ormond, wasn't it, Chance, where we were talking about that none of us celebrate. Like we do one thing and then we move on to the next thing really quickly. We break world records, we do things that's onto the next thing, and we don't just take that moment to celebrate. And I think we're trying to do it a little bit more now. And I think it's because we were always saying, like, the game's not over, we're still going, we haven't got time to celebrate, the game's going, we're keeping going. But we are trying to do that a lot more now, for especially with the kids, is just to say, okay, this is a core memory, let's put this in the box and keep this and enjoy it and take it in. And yeah, we're not going to like rest in our laurels ever and be like, okay, we've achieved that, we're amazing, we're going to stop now, we've got to keep growing and keep going. But that's my little thing, is to try and enjoy those moments just a little bit longer than what we do.
Yeah, I really like that. I got this image of, have you guys ever seen Bobby Fischer, the videos of him where he used to play like 8, 9, 10 games of chess at once, and he would just be constantly jumping between boards. And he never took any time to celebrate any of those movements or any of those wins or any of those things. It would just be like handshake off to the next thing, handshake off to the next thing. And he would always be moving board to board to board to board to board. And I think we do that a lot in life, is we jump from one thing to the next, to the next, to the next. Whether there's successes or not, there's like a handshake. And by the time the hand's even out, I'm on the next game. Like, what am I doing over there? I think that's something to be aware of. Absolutely. Shaun, you got any points?
I do. So Fisher, that's a great example, Bobby Fischer. Let's not confuse things. I'm not talking to you, Chance. I'm for the general audience as a whole, for myself in particular. I don't want to confuse the example that you just used, because in my opinion, what he was doing is okay if that's what he knows he's doing. And so at some point in his young life, Bobby Fischer decided that he was going to become a world champion in chess, period. And that was his drive. That was his direction. And so that's what he became. And in order to do what he did, you've got to have focus. You've got to be driven. And you've got to use some Occam's razor to exclude all of the white noise that is not serving you well towards your intended path, which is to become a world champion in chess, which is no easy gig. And so he had to be laser locked. Now, upon reflection, many years later, after all those handshakes, a fleeting handshake and straight on to the next game, many years later, looking back on all of those moments, would he change anything? Well, that's for Bobby to figure out, and that's for us as third-party viewers or as remote viewers to kind of consider these moments using his life as an example. What is wrong with being so focused and driven that you have to time manage things so tightly that the normal convention of shaking a hand after a win and hanging out and, did you enjoy the game? I enjoyed the game. Are we friends now? All of these things, they have to be incised, cut off to the side, and then streamlined directly towards World Championshipville. Would he have changed anything? I don't know. If I was in his shoes, would I have changed anything? I don't know. But I want to believe, I hope, in this little imaginary role, if I was in his shoes, if I wasn't doing it well in the moment, I want to believe that years later, I'd be looking back and thinking, I could have done that better. There was a way for me to do it, to achieve the goal that I wanted, while still applying some more humanism or some more interaction or some more sharing my passion, my goal, my drive with the person I'm shaking hands with. Because you know how it goes. When you bump into a hero, when you bump into maybe a childhood hero, just as Alana described. For me, it kind of goes like this. not full awestruck, but I don't gain from the moment the way I could have, the way I dreamed of, if the other person isn't as cool as I had hoped they would be. And so if I build up a childhood hero and then I'm meeting them when I'm 47 and I'm 61 now, if I'd have met a person at 47 and thought, this is it. I wonder if Keanu Reeves is as cool as I think he is. And if he would have dissed me, if he would have been dismissive, if he would have been a jerk, like that moment would have like so impacted me. But Keanu, he may not have even blinked. He may not have even noticed. He may not have been in the moment with me. I'm fully in the moment. And he's looking for a quick handshake and moving on to the next handshake. And so what we build up as our expectations of the moment is on us. But the person that we're having the moment with, of course, it's also on them. And so I think there's this interesting line, this ebb and flow of being in it with yourself while trying to be in it with the other person who's standing next to you.
I wrote down here interrupting someone else's moment, and I think that's we can do too, is that we don't recognize someone else having a moment or being in something on their own, especially with celebrities, because you get people walking up to them all the time trying to get pictures and trying to get in that moment with them, whereas it can be dismissive, or they could be in a really negative moment. They could have gotten some really horrible news on the phone and then got to look at this next person in line and just want to move on. So it's I love where you're going with this. This is great. Hans, I saw you taking notes there a second ago. What do you got?
I mean, for me, it's big. So I have the pleasure of having a lot of friends who've broken a lot of world records and some things like that. And I think in the community as well, right? Like, you couldn't tell me that the community is not full of guys who are missing something, right? And I go back to that because I just have seen it, and I know it to be true in myself as well. And so I think the issue could be, and just kind of speaking to Shaun's point, is that when it's over and you have the regrets, or you didn't know because you weren't a part of it. Now, if you're a guy like, so this is the conversation I had with my boy. My boy is just graduated basic. He's on his way to Ranger or regiment and everything else. And so the conversation I had with him was, hey man, you see all the negative sides of what your dad deals with. And he's like, yeah. I said, I want you to be aware that this is a thing that can happen. Because I think what happens is a lot of guys get to the backside of it or the end of it, and they're mad because they didn't know these things existed. PTSD, lack of sleep, insomnia, whatever. But it's a different thing if you're like, I know what this costs, right? And it goes back to like my saying is, everything costs, everyone pays, right? You just don't. There's no escaping. What you pay is different. But I think once you know it up front, then it's a different conversation. And that's the thing with my son is I'm like, hey man, you're gonna pay. How much, how big, how little, the awareness you have is the different thing. And I think it's the same thing when you're talking about these feats. So like the Bobby Fischer thing, or like I'll use my friend. My friend was a world champ powerlifter. And they'll tell you he can't remember. Right. Because it was always on to the next one. And so for example, powerlifting, you have 2 minutes to make your lift. 9 lifts. It's 18 minutes. So these guys train for their years, break their bodies apart, and then if you ask them, they can't remember. And I think that's where the problem lies, right? Because so many of us are rooted in this, like, I gotta be this, I gotta be there, And I don't remember who it was, but the guy was talking about his first championship fight. He says, I don't remember anything. He said, I can't figure it out. I can't remember. He said, it's just a blur. He won, and he said the second one, he's like, I'm gonna remember. And that's Conor McGregor, my fault. And there's a picture of him when he walks out on the stage for his weigh-in, where he stops and he looks at the crowd and he raises his hand, and he was like, this was me taking it in. And I think that's kind of what we're all kind of saying. It's like, because I'm with you, Shaun. Like, if you're about it and you got a thing that you're after, get after it, right? But I just like, again, like in my coaching, I deal with guys who will say they want one thing. And then again, I present them with a cost, and I say, hey, this is what it costs. And then it starts changing. They start, hey man, I want to run a 3-hour marathon. Okay, that means you're gonna have to do this, change your diet. Hydration is gonna be 2 days out from your long run. But and it's, I don't know, I want to drink on Friday. Like, well, okay, well, maybe you want a 5-hour marathon. All right, now we're talking. You know what I mean? And so I think that's kind of the conversation that people don't have, right? You don't know it when you get into the thing, or you're in it. You're after the next thing, like Nick Saban had it. Like he was like, they were like, "What's wrong? You just won a national championship." And he's like, "Focus on the next season." And certain people know, and that's okay. And then other people I think are completely unaware. And then when it's over, they're like, "Oh my goodness, like what did I do? Where was I? Did I?" And I think that's kind of the little small tidbit that it's interesting. Like, and I think a great example of it for sports wise is Kobe. Like they talked about him missing this game winning shot, and he sits on the bench and he's got his hands in his head. And they're like, "Man, he's really taking it hard." And then they ask him what's going on, and he was like, "Oh, I was just trying to work out what I did wrong." I said, that's
right in it in that moment. I love it. It's challenging though, because we know that there's got to be future. Go back to the point I made earlier, is the fact that there is future. There is a future, is a possibility. And if we don't plan for it, if we don't fix the things that we want to fix in the now, the future, a negative future can roll out very quickly if we allow it to. Alana, you got any thoughts?
Yeah, I was thinking about what was being said there around the guys, because we all know that the guys like to prove themselves, not just to themselves, but to their teammates and things. And I think Dean and I have had a lot of conversations over the years that he got out, and I think depending on how you get out as well, like medically discharged, or if you're out at a time that maybe wasn't your choice, you kind of feel a little bit lost. You're out of that tribe. You don't know what you're doing anymore. So, Dean took that and channeled it into, breaking world records and things. And, but as you say, what was the cost, to go and break that world record? He had to train every day. He was out cycling 100 miles pretty much every day while the babies are growing up. He's already missed time because while he was serving, and now like he's out there doing this bike ride, and then you've got to go away for 4 months to try and break these world records and do these things. And it was fully supported from my end, because that was his dream and that was what he wanted to do, and I'm going to help him make it happen. But then when he comes back for the next challenge, and it's like, okay, well maybe I'm not loving this as much now, so do you want to do it again? And it had to be that kind of that strong pause where we said, look, why do you now want to go and roll the Nile, or whatever your next challenge is going to be? What is it you're looking for? Like, who are you trying to prove this to? Because it isn't just a physical exertion thing now. This is something else you're doing. There's a reason that you feel like you keep having to prove yourself, and why is it we keep having to do that? So I think that once we sat down and said, what is it that's missing? What is it that's really missing here, and who are you trying to prove it to? We were able to channel that energy into a different direction. And what Dean would have the issue was, he would think of something and he would put that out there. Like I think when we were talking about kayaking down the West Coast, for example, he went on Jocko and told everybody that he was planning on doing that. And when he came back, it was like, well, are we doing that? Are we? Because he actually said we were both going to do it. And I said, well, what would be our reason for doing it? Because remember, we're going to be away from the kids. Are we going to be raising money? Is there going to be a cause? Because the why has to kind of fit that. And what I do is, if I'm doing something, you'll kind of rarely hear about what I'm doing until it happens. If I'm going to be doing a movie, or building a foundation, or bringing out a new bill into legislation, or whatever it might be, you're going to hear about it when it's very close to happening, because I want to keep that energy within me, and I'm going to share it when I'm ready to share it. Other people might share that energy out, and I get nervous about that, because although there'll be a lot of people backing you, there'll be a lot of people trying to knock you as well. So I'm very careful about how we put those energies around, and what we do with them, and when we share them. And I think that sometimes can be because I think there's a lot of pride and ego can get in the way too. So we've got to realize, just pull it back. It doesn't have to be just the why of what the end game, the Maserati or whatever why, but the real deep inner work of what the why is about.
Well, you gotta know specifically why you're gonna pay that cost, whatever that cost is. And I remember listening to that Jocko episode and going, man, that's gonna be a heck of a trip, but like you're months away from your kids and like you're out in the water and you're gonna have to constantly come in and fight that. Like there's a lot of pain involved in that, both physical and emotional. And that'd be a tough trip. Be a heck of a time going down there. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
Yeah, I appreciate the way that you're doing it, Alana. I think that that is the right approach, in my opinion, the way that you're doing it. But as you said, others like to put it out there right from the get-go. From day one, they want to almost commit themselves to the task that perhaps they hadn't fully thought through. But by saying it out loud into the public space, now you kind of got to own it. And that drives people. I'm not saying that drives Dean. I'm not sure how Dean is wired. I don't think Dean knows how he's wired. But I think that some people just need to put it out there like on day one. That's not my way, I don't think. I like to get deeper into it before I start chirping about it. But, even if I do speak out of line, if I say on day one I'm about to swim my way to Mars, somehow I'm going to try to figure it out. And so I think that's what I want to focus on right now in my point is, as humans, we can, as Alana did at some point in her young life, we can have a thought that enters our head, that seed. And if we've got a passion for that seed and we want to grow that thought idea, then we get after it. We start doing something about it. What you do and what you say and what you believe can be three different things. And so Alana at some point said in her mind, I'm going to do something about human trafficking. And then her actions aligned with her thoughts in her head. And then at some point in the future, she verbally, out loud, externally to the world said, I'm now in the game of human trafficking. I'm going to figure this out. I'm going to start providing solutions. And so when she said that, it's anyone's guess. I don't know if Alana knows when she said it publicly out loud to the first human externally. And that's something that I'd like to hear a little bit more about. But the point is this, that you can think, you can say, and you can do. And all three of those things are completely different. It's when you start aligning them until, if you can, create a laser beam-like single focus on those three things. That's when I feel the universe starts to move.
Alana, what are you thinking?
Yeah, I just say to back up on that point, the think, say, and do things, they can change and they can. I think a lot of people are scared that once they've said it, they have to do it. And that's cool because it's a good motivator to be like, okay, I've said it now, I'm going to do it. And I like that. And that is a good position to be in. But if something changes or something like within you that you don't want to do it, or you've made a mistake, or you've committed to something that's maybe, and we teach this from the kids from a young age. It's okay to say no. It's okay to go back on something that you've maybe feel like you've overcommitted on. I think that can sometimes that kind of pride and ego thing can sometimes get in people's way when there's actually a point where you can go, actually, maybe this isn't the right path for me. Maybe I can take something from the stuff that I've learned. I mean, I'm not ever saying give up to take the easy road. If it's something you really want and it's something that you desire, then that trip to the pub or whatever it might be isn't a good enough excuse. Like, you have to make sure that. But if you're saying, actually, I don't want to be away from the kids for 5 months, or I don't actually want to be like committing myself to something, or it's maybe not, I've maybe committed to something that isn't actually aligning with me ethically. I thought it might have been an easy way, but it's actually not the right, like, there might be a reason. And you don't have to be constantly thinking, and I think because of that age of social media, where like, what are people going to think of me if I do this? Who really cares? Like, in the grand scheme of things, where we're talking about our ancestors and our future before and our future generations, those little bits, nobody really cares about. Stop worrying about what other people are going to think and just do what is right for you in that moment, seize the day, and right for you in the future.
That is a great point. It actually reminds me, when I first got out of the military, I really wanted to go do blasting. Like, I wanted to use my skill with explosives and understanding and all this stuff. And I was like, okay, well, now that I'm out, I'm just going to go and work out in the mines. And then I started actually diving into the thought pattern. I started researching it. I started talking to companies, and it was like, you're going to be gone for 3 weeks at a time. And I was like, nope. I got out of the military specifically so that I could spend time with my family. And now I'm gonna jump into another job that puts me away from my family again. I don't think I'm gonna do that. And similarly to this podcast, when I got started up, I was fully in the realm of the equine world. I wanted to run my own ranch. I wanted to help veterans come out and work with equine therapy and all that stuff. And that hasn't disappeared, but it just got slid into the background a little bit because this has become my focus. And I'm cool with that because this is going to help people, because my original why is to help people. I want to facilitate information. And right now, this is the best way to do it. And I think it's a great point. Hanse, you got any thoughts on this?
Yeah, I think you kind of have to purchase real estate there, right? I think like one of the things we talk about is, if I have a guy who's never completed any of his challenges, then he doesn't get to back out, right? And so I'm really big on like, hey, hey man, like, you haven't done any of these things, so let's do a couple, right? And then you kind of purchase enough real estate where you can make those decisions and be like, I'm not interested in it. And I personally just went through this, right? I was gonna try and attempt my last powerlifting meet, right, and go out with a bang, get a big total especially for the semi-old guy category. And I was lifting, and I woke up one morning and I was just like, this doesn't feel the same. It just doesn't feel the same. Had nothing to do with like physicality or anything else. I just was like, that fire is not there. And so I called a friend and I asked him how he felt. And, he was a world champion, big time power lifter. And he was like, yeah, man, my chip's not on my shoulder anymore. He's like, I'm a happy dude. It's a sport that usually takes a giant chip. And I was like, oh, it's funny. I'm happy for the first time in my life too. Weird. So, and instead of having that debate, like, I'm not really beholden to a lot of people. I kind of call it the council. There's like 12 people whose opinions I really care about. Everybody else, I was just like, "No, it's not a big deal." And so I knew that how they felt, and they weren't going to care. And so I was just like, all right, well, pivot, new thing, find something different, find something that sets you on fire, find something that, changes you and grows you, And so I think it's one of those things where you just kind of have to realize, like, if you've never had any wherewithal, maybe you should find some and finish what you start. But if you've had enough and you've done enough, like, sounds like, Dean, I've heard his name before. I've seen some of his stuff. Sounds like he's purchased enough real estate. Like, he's got that leeway, and I feel the same about myself and a lot of other people. But, it's just one of those things. I think you got to kind of take an accurate gauge of who and what you are. And then also, how you want to grow. I think that's important too. Sometimes that no, or that feeling is a growing point. You wake up or you're not interested in it. And it's like you said earlier, Alana, like, there's a million reasons to not run a marathon every day. There's a million, it's one of the reasons why I do train early in the morning. It's because I know at noon, the kids are going to have 3 new excuses for things I have to do. I've got to chase 5 kids around, man, 4 kids around. It's the whole thing is like, it's, so you always have something. And so I just think that's important.
Yeah, that's a great point. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
It is an important point, and I'm gonna reinforce it, perhaps, I hope. I think there's a distinction between a dabbler, Chance, we've talked about this on a number of podcasts with a number of guests. There's a difference between someone who dabbles and someone who engages with conviction. And you can't understand if you're a dabbler or not until you engage with something with such conviction that you can look back at yourself and realize that you were dabbling in life. And so it doesn't matter who you are. You've got to choose something that you're going to kick ass in. And you've got to freaking kick ass for a while until you realize that you're not a dabbler. Once you understand that, just in one thing, that you're an ass kicker in whatever, freaking world champion in macrame. Once you know that, now you can do it in anything. So you've got to choose something, anything, and get freaking after it. If you can do it in that, you can do it in all things. But then once you know you can do it in all things, then you got to be careful in what you choose for the next thing. Because now that you know you're not going to dabble anymore, your commitment to the next thing is not just a day or two. It's generally about a decade or more. And so you have to be careful with what you choose, that you're not going to dabble in. You've got to see the future to some degree on where it's going to take and what the cost is, as Hansi said. And then you just got to go for it. Now, when you're going for it, as Hansi said, he was thinking about getting back into the powerlifting game, started training and all of that good stuff, and then just decided, you know what, I'm not really feeling it. I'm totally good with that. I'm totally good with a person who at some point in that trajectory says, you know, I think I'm kind of done. I'm pivoting. I'm good if they've been in the game, but I'm not good with that attitude if they have never been in a game, any game. You got to get in the game and kick that ass. And then you can start deciding what you're not going to kick ass at. If you've never kicked ass, you don't understand what I'm saying. And so for myself, I decided at one point I was going to start racing 24-hour solos. And then in my 30th 24-hour solo, after becoming a world champion, I was halfway into a race, like not even halfway. I was about 8 or 9 hours into a race, and I just freaking quit. My 30th race. I was like a seasoned veteran. Not that I was the guy, but everyone who was in the game kind of knew me to some degree. And so for me to quit in that moment was diabolically hard. Because I kept telling myself, that's not who I am. I ain't a quitter. I don't quit things. I freaking kick that ass all the way to the finish line and then look for the next thing. But that's not what I was feeling in that race. I was only a few hours in and I was not feeling it. I was kind of over it. It's not that I didn't have the passion. There was just something about the course that I did not love. And it was the lack of love for the moment that was starting to become corrosive. And I knew in the moment that if I finish that race, I may never race or ride another mountain bike in my life. And so I freaking quit. And I don't like that moment when I look back on it and realize that I was a quitter. But then I look back on the moment and realize that was the perfect thing for me to do. Because I'm still kicking ass on a mountain bike. I still love I still love shredding. So if I would have been dogmatic and stubborn and just thought, nope, I don't care. I ain't a quitter. I'll take it all the way to the finish line. It might have broken mountain biking for me. And that would have sucked. And so it doesn't really matter who you are, whether you're starting the game or a seasoned vet in the game, whatever your game is. You got to have the conviction to see it through to the end until the moment that you see you don't need to get it to the end. And then you got to take the time to think about who you are in the moment.
This leads to an interesting question then, because that seems like a pretty thin line for most people. Like you're saying, if you have experience with really diving into a subject, with going all in on something, then you know where that line is. But for those that don't, for those that, it's everything they've done it for a couple of years and they kind of, did it here and there. They haven't really ever bought into something. I think looking back on myself, there were point in times where I thought I had bought in. I thought I had done the work and then said, okay, no, now I'm going to pivot. Okay, now I'm going to do something else. Okay, now I'm going to do something else, without realizing that I had been through 3 or 4 things within a couple of years. And I'm wondering if you guys have any thoughts on like either the recognition of that moment or recognition of it just flying by, or if you have any experiences where you realize that you were doing that. Alana? You got any thoughts?
I think, listening to Hansi and Shaun there, I think I was very much getting the the bit in Forrest Gump where he just decides he's not going to run anymore. I think that was definitely that feeling I can get from both of you there. But I think that comes back without talking about the why again. But it's once you can form a really good mentality. Forrest Gump knew that he wanted to run and he was going to run, and he wasn't doing it for anybody. He wasn't doing it for any reason whatsoever other than for himself, and he wanted to run. And when he stopped running, like nobody could question Shaun on the bike, Hansi powerlifting, Forrest running. Like that's who they were, and they knew that that was it, and they were done. When they knew what they were done, they were done. But I could bet probably everything that I own that if someone came up to Hansi and said, like, I've got a gun to your kid's head, and if you don't lift that, then you'd be lifting again within like a breath. If somebody said to me, Alana, you've got to go and cycle that bike because your kids are at the end of it and something's going to happen to them if you don't, then I'm on that bike and I'm cycling. Like I've got no desire to do any of that type of thing, but if for the right purpose and the right reason and the right drive, I would be on there and I would be doing it because I know my mentality. I know that if I put myself to something, I'm going to do it. I was at an event recently and we started, I think probably 6 a.m. I was helping with this non-profit, and we were working all day solid. It was just a non-stop. I think when I looked at my aura, I'd done like 14 miles of walking that day, just putting this event on, doing this thing. And it, there was a no food thing. It was a lot of lifting and carrying, a lot of stuff going on, just all day non-stop. And by the end, I was exhausted. My back was killing, like everything was hurting. But there was still work to be done. There were still things to be packed up. Everything had to get put back in where it was. It was 2 a.m. and we were still going, and I was watching people slowly starting to leave from the organizational team, and I'm kind of looking at them going, where are they going? Like there's still work to be done here. We all hurt, we're all in pain, we're all tired, but things need to be done. And I was looking at the people that were slowly leaving, and by the end there was, Dean was obviously there, but there was only me and one other lady kind of there, both mums, funnily enough. And we were still going because this job needed to be done. Like we need to finish this. And it was interesting to look at the mentality, to think you're tired and you're just going to leave, but there's people here that are still working and there's still work that needs to be done, compared to the people that were like, absolutely, we can never leave. We can never leave while there's still work needing to be done, and that we've got an end game to get to here. And it was interesting for me to think, I wonder how that mindset works, that you just genuinely believe, okay, you're tired, you're going to go now and leave other people in the race. I can't get my head into that space, so I don't know how that feels. But so that's where I'm saying that it is like a physical conditioning thing, but your mental state is how, if you're not in that mental state where you can finish that and you can get to the end, you just don't need to prove it, then that's maybe something you need to work on.
Yeah, I wrote down here, you can sleep when you're dead. It's an interesting mindset though, because if you don't take care of yourself, and you can run yourself into the ground in a heartbeat without recognizing, like, you can get the job done, but then are you going to be capable afterwards? Like Shaun's point, if you hate what you were doing afterwards, then are you benefiting the job? Are you benefiting yourself? And I think it's a tough line in my mind. Hansi, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. So I think, of course, it's individual, right? But I think the way to put it, there's a documentary called 14 Peaks. I don't know if you guys have ever seen it. In there, he says, when you're 45% effed, you're not completely effed, right? And I think once you understand that and you learn that line is when you can differentiate it at the end, right? And so being able to understand that, because like a lot of people think they're tired, right? Like, I'm tired. And then you get them on a mat, or you get them, halfway up a 14er or whatever the thing is, right? And they're like, oh, this is what tired is, right? Like we had a conversation recently where we were talking about what sport offers you the most exhaustion, like, right? What practices are just the most grueling? And mine was, jujitsu and when you're going live goes over and over again, and then the 400 and 800 meter race. I just don't, in wrestling, I think those are just the most grueling and intensive sports ever. And I think that's kind of what I'm saying here is like, if you know that line, the real line of quit, not that fake line where everybody's like, oh, I'm tired, I just want to go home, like, but the line where you're just like, I cannot physically do another thing for you, right? That comes into play later, because like that's I've been there, I've hit that line multiple times. And so then when it came to this powerlifting thing this time, I was like, this has nothing to do with this. There is no fire here. And I'm so used to being a light switch, not a dial. Right. It's always been a light switch for me. I just boop, I'm ready. Right. I've never had to crank a dial in my life, And so for the first time ever, I'm like, I gotta turn this dial on, man. How do you do this? At 3, that's not cool. And so I think that's kind of part of it. As far as like the tired thing, I think the other thing here is like, I mean, just to say it out loud, because I think it's a big thing that I'm always talking about. Like I got a guy I was just coaching recently, and he was like, I don't do a lot of things with my family because I'm always tired. And I was like, what? And I was like, dude, do you know how many times I've been at an amusement park shuffling around after 36 hours of nonsense just because I got to make sure I'm dad? Like, like me and my buddy call it dad, super dad. You're only super dad when you're tired, man. Like that's the only time. And I was like, man, you've never, he's like, no, if we try to do an amusement park on the weekdays, my kids would tell you we're not going to do it because dad's tired. And I was like, my kids would say the opposite. And he was like, I never thought about it. He literally was like, I never thought about once doing this stuff tired. And so I always said, been tired before, been hungry before. I'll be tired again. I'll be hungry again. And it's okay. And so I think that's just exposing people to that and being able to really push that dial is one of those things that, doesn't happen enough, because I know for me, right, like hanging around the soft community and jujitsu and all the things in the world, man, like you think this is normal. And then you go hang out with normal people, real normal people, and they're like, you're doing what? Right. I just let the cat out the bag that I'm going to try and climb Kilimanjaro in July. And for my community and the guys I hang out with, it's pretty normal. It's on the scale of like, oh, that's wild, but it's not crazy. But to the people I was talking to, they were like, why would you do that? What do you mean you're going to, and I'm like, why would you sit on the couch every day? And the guy was like, touche. And I was like, I think it hurts me to do it. If I make 2 passes through Netflix, it's over. But anyway, so I think the point is like, you have to start. And again, it goes to what Shaun and I were initially saying. You have to be able to know where your quit line is anyways. And if you've never touched that, then you have to kind of commit to some, I think those moments that everyone on this call has probably had where you're like, I don't want to do this anymore. And then you do it. You finish the marathon, you finish the prep for the jiu-jitsu tournament, you finish the getting ready for selection, whatever it is. How many moments did you have during those preps where it's like, hey man, when I ran my first marathon, I can tell you what, that 16 miler was harder than the marathon because I had no desire to do it.
Yeah.
And I still remember it to this day. I was like, why was this so hard? And I just remember that Saturday I woke up and I was like, we don't run 16 miles. I'm not running this. And I just complained inside the whole run. Yeah. And then I got to my car and I was like, why'd you do that? But anyway, so I just think that's one of the things is you finding that quit line and then really abusing it, because it's not what you think it is. It's the whole 14 peaks. You're only 45% there.
Yeah.
And I think the last thing is just the Misogi part. I'll throw that in there. Everybody being able to have a Misogi and really kind of push. And, and one of the rules for a real Misogi for us is the fact that you have to have a 50% chance of failing. Right. We were doing some Misogis, and I realized like halfway through the second year when we were doing it, I was like, this isn't real, because we all know we're going to make this one. We need something where we're like, I might not make it, man. So I think that's, getting there.
Yeah. That's a really good line to find of, there has to be consequence to it. If there's no real consequence to whether or not you pass or fail, or like personal consequence, then I think it takes away from the experience in and of itself. If it's just kind of simple and you're walking through it, then it's not really a challenge at all at that point. It's not, by it not being challenging, you're robbing yourself of the time doing it, I think, a little bit. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I do. Not too long ago, recently, someone was chirping about how they're going to climb Kilimanjaro this year, and they're building it up like they're about to do K2 without oxygen and no shoes on. I mean, that's how much they built it out. Like it was the big deal. And I just got tired of it. Eventually, I said, "Bro, did you know that 14-year-olds saunter up Kilimanjaro? So dial it back, you know?" And so that is an important aspect to this conversation. For some people, climbing up Kilimanjaro is a big deal. And for others, sauntering up Kilimanjaro is a yawn fest. It's who you are and how you've constructed it in your mind. It's your journey. That mountain is your journey. And how you frame it up in your head is how the experience will play out to some degree. Hansi had said something interesting. Taking someone up a mountain, they're halfway up the mountain and they're wiped out and, like they're exhausted or whatever the case is. My initial thought was, wait till you see the other half of the mountain that you're going to walk up with me. Wait till you feel the doubling effect of exhaustion, because that's kind of what's going to happen. Or that person is going to quit. They're going to turn around and walk back down the mountain. And then when they get to the bottom of the mountain with me, they'll wish they would have climbed the mountain, because I'm just going to freaking rag on them. I'm going to let them know what's up. I'm going to hold them accountable. If you told me we're getting to the top of the mountain by the end of the day and you quit halfway up, you're going to hear from me, just as I would expect to hear from them if I quit halfway up. Of course, it depends on the reason. It depends on all kinds of things. The message will be delivered accordingly based on what caused the thing. But to say you're going to go all the way up, quit halfway, and saunter down without a care in the world, that doesn't fly with me. I think there's a moment for everyone where we all have to be held accountable. And you might have the best reason, but that doesn't mean that the best reason in the world precludes the conversation at the bottom of the mountain. There always needs to be a conversation, even with the best excuses or the best reasoning, or even if that was the thing to do, was quit and turn around at the halfway point. The conversation still has to happen about the why it happened. Otherwise, it's a hallway pass. Everyone gets a free pass to the next thing that is a quit point at the next thing. And so halfway up the mountain, everyone struggles. Me, you, everyone. But it's what we do with the struggle moment. And I think that is the critical piece. If you know that you can saunter up to the top of Kilimanjaro as a 14-year-old and yawn the whole way, why even freaking do it? If you're someone who thinks that Kilimanjaro is going to be super challenging, why are you doing it? The why of everything. Why engage in boring? Why engage in exciting? Why engage in the impossible? Why engage in something you can do in about 3 seconds? Why? And I think, more often than not, the moment that someone's lacing up their boots to start climbing up the mountain, they're either already at the top, they're paying their bills, they're thinking about what they're going to do tomorrow, they're wishing that they'd have bought another pair of branch spanking new boots. They're not actually lacing their boots. They're anywhere else but putting their boot on. Because as humans, we don't stay present often enough.
Alana, you got any points on this?
The one thing that I was thinking about while you were both speaking was it's something that nobody here could relate to, but there's a point when you're giving birth, and if you know anybody that's given birth, they might have explained this point to you, but when the head comes out and it's the most painful thing you'll ever experience in your life, and then they're like, oh no, the shoulders are coming. So you know that head hurt and these shoulders are wider, so you know this is about to hurt a hell of a lot more. You're like, I can't do it. I can't. No, I'm not doing it. She's just going to have to stay there because I'm not doing it. Like, that hurts too much. But you've got no choice. You've got to do it. like that baby's got to come out, and you know it's about to hurt, and you know it's going to be the worst thing you're ever going to go through, but you've got to do it. And you learn this new strength within you that you didn't know you had. The pain is the worst thing you've ever gone through, and you're about to go through a little bit more, and you're going to do it to yourself. But then we go on to have more babies, and we do it again because we know we've just learned this new strength that we can go through. But, you know, everyone's got that different thing. As you're saying, like, what is your mountain? Sorry.
All good?
Which celebrity was that?
I can't even find you now. Here we go. There you are. So cut you right off. Yeah, but what is your mountain? You know, I remember sitting down with speaking about 14 Peaks, sitting down with Nims before he, as he was thinking about the idea about doing the 14 Peaks, and there was no Nims was a mountain guy, and that's what he done. He was Nepalese. He was from the Gurkha tradition, so he was always going to be able to climb those mountains. That was never ever the issue. It was the funding, it was the time, it was the are you going to be able to do all those things? Those things were Nims's biggest challenge. That was his biggest peak. That was the hardest thing that he had to do, was how are you going to be able to fund this? How are you going to be able to do it? And I remember sitting down at the very, very beginning, like, how are we going to come up with this? Him and Dean were originally going to do it together. There was all sorts of different things there, but the financing of that was the hardest thing, because as you're saying, Shaun, climbing a mountain was easy to him. It was his bread and butter. It was what he'd done. Raising $500,000 to be able to climb those mountains, impossible. Like, he didn't have a clue how to do that. He has to bring in people that do know how to do it. He has to bring in subject matter experts, and he has to ask his wife, can we remortgage your house? Can we do all these things to make it work? And that's where it comes to, what's the cost? What's the cost of doing this? Is it going to be worth it? Are we going to take this gamble? And that's what he had to decide to do. So to the outside world, climbing 14 Peaks is like, whoa, that is unbelievable. That's amazing. To Nims, that was nothing. That was just literally a walk in the park. It was, how are we going to actually do it financially? And he done the right thing by calling in the experts who can help, who can make this happen. Where can we bring all these people together? And there's going to be challenges there that are going to be so out within their reach. Like, you know, you speak to people like Nims or Dean or anybody in that kind of world. I don't want to talk about finances. If I'm going to war, somebody else pays for the tank and the guns and everything else. I'm not thinking about that. But that's their biggest challenge.
You know, it makes me think. I have this little saying in my head. Anytime I come up with a reason as to why I can't do something, or anytime where I come up with a challenge or something like that, I have to tell myself it's Tuesday. And I say that because when I was in the military, I remember talking to other engineers, and we talk about explosives, we talk about blowing stuff up, and we talk like it would be Tuesday. It'd be no big deal. But you talk to anybody else from any other units, and they would be like, you do what? You carry around high explosives in your backpack? That is friggin' insane. And we'd be like, yeah, no, it's great. It's a lot. But we would then hear stories from them, and we'd be like, are you on crack? Like, that's not, people shouldn't be doing that. And so now I use those moments of like, it's Tuesday. So if it's challenging for me, it's Tuesday for somebody else. And it's not that big of a deal. So get to work. And I have to remind myself of that pretty often, of it's just Tuesday. Shaun, you got any thoughts on any of this?
I didn't know that you were involved with NIMS to that degree, Alana, or you and Dean were involved with NIMS. But certainly one of the things that I took away from the special was that NIMS's biggest challenge was money. And I could see that as clear as day, and the struggles that he was having to go through. And that's what made me appreciate the documentary so much, was the fact that his arena of adversity was scrambling day to day to like explain it to his parents, to explain it to his girl, to explain it to those around him, to explain it to himself. Like, that was his adversity, was the thing that he knew nothing about. And it came across clearly to me, but I'm not sure everyone picked up what was going on actually in that documentary. if you don't know the kind of person that, or the kind of people that NIMS represents, the focus is on the mountain, when really, to me, my focus as I watched it was, where is NIMS struggling? And again, it was apparent that he was struggling to understand how international finance works, or how scaling up an expedition costs. And I love that, man, because he was in all the way in, both feet, both hands, head first, directly into it, owning it like a freaking superstar, where, it was kind of a journey that was almost fraught with danger, because at times I think he was unaware of how close it was to all crumbling. That's what I took away. Anyway, I felt that he wasn't 100% constantly aware of the risks he was taking, not on the mountain, but in the public eye, on the international stage, as it were. Of course, it all turned out well, and NIMS deserves all of the accolades that he's got, and then some. But it's easy to focus on the success of that story rather than keep going back and revisiting NIMS's weakness. His weakness being understanding a number of things, like all of us. And so, how does the story in the public eye get twisted from that guy's a superstar, when really part of the story was he's actually a bit of a, I don't want to say village idiot, but he's a bit of a guy who doesn't know what he's doing right now. The focus is on hero climber rather than typical human. We all have shortcomings. We all have gaps that we have to fill by surrounding ourselves with people who know better than we do. I would have loved for some of that documentary, some of that movie, to have illustrated it a little bit more, that none of this would happen. And I know it was said in the documentary, but I would have liked to have seen it reinforced. None of this happens. Nothing great in life happens if you're just a freaking solo player. You can't be on the start line by yourself and cross the finish line by yourself and have done it all by yourself. And so until you said, Alana, that somehow, you and Dean had a maybe a small part to play in this, I wouldn't have known it. And then I wouldn't have thought of you and Dean a little bit higher. What is that, 11 out of 10 now? I wouldn't have bumped you up a little bit on the sort of radar of, frick, they are awesome people. I think people need to hear that. People would have needed to hear it in the documentary, that the team wrapped around him are just made up of like-minded people, or not, that are in this to win this, not for NIMS, but for something bigger than NIMS. That's what I would have liked to have gained a little bit more from the documentary. And I know it was probably said in the documentary. It's just that I didn't pick up on it quite as much as I've just learned now.
Hanse, you got any thoughts?
Yeah. One of the things I think we're talking about too is talking about like a Misogi and all this other stuff is one of the things that I found is most of the people I surround myself with, they have no problem with real physical challenges. So one of the things I found myself doing when we talk about Misogis and challenges, where's your real challenge? If I ask you to go run 50 miles, you'll run it. Right. And so is your real challenge speaking in front of people? Is your real challenge, writing or whatever it is? And so I've always I'm kind of leaning more into that realm with a lot of people that I'm coaching, talking to and dealing, and even myself, right? Where's the thing that I'm really going to struggle at and really kind of having that moment. And so that's kind of one of the things that I hear when we're talking about this. And so it's just kind of what's your real Misogi, right? What's your real challenge here? Because it's Alana said, he's going to climb the mountains. That's easy for him. So where's the real problem? Where's the real thing? And so I think that's worth saying out loud. The other thing, I just wanted to bring this up because this is a thing I love talking about when it comes to movies and things like that. It's what did you watch versus what did you see? right? Because I think a lot of people, when we watch something and you get this like overview that everyone gets, right? And so it's like what Shaun just talked about, what he watched versus what did he actually see. Like for me, what I saw was something completely different. It had nothing to do with the peaks and everything else. I saw a bunch of bonding, brotherhood. You know what I mean? I'm always interested in what people actually got out of the movie, or did they just get the baseline thing? Another one I use, I don't know if you've seen this, The Last Dance, the Michael Jordan documentary. Where they do all 6 championships. To me, that's a masterclass in motivation. This has nothing to do with basketball. It's literally a documentary about motivation. It's him finding the smallest, pettiest, best ways to be motivated to go do this thing, right? And it's just a conversation I think is cool to have. But as far as just the whole thing, man, like the motivation to kind of find something and do something, or the why. I think that's the big one I kind of took away from, because I have a love-hate relationship with why. So it's interesting for Shaun to throw it out so much. I'm big. I have a lot of whys, but at the same time, the older I get, the more I care less about why. Right? I know, and maybe it's because my larger why, and I think that's, now that I'm saying it out loud, maybe that's what it actually is. I have a larger why, and everything drives and flows through that. What do I become? Who do I become? How am I helping? My mission statement is that I don't want young men to ever have to go through the things I went through. Right. And so that's why I speak the way I speak, is why I show the things I show. Guys aren't used to guys like who look like me and talk like me to talk about the things I talk about. And I get told that on a regular basis. And I never knew that. But then I double down, as I kind of come out of things and whatever else. So anyways, I say all that just to say, so maybe that's why my love-hate relationship with why is what it is. Because I don't care about all my smaller whys, I also, I call it living the search. I'm constantly living for a search, for a meaning, for a thing, for growth. And I've kind of set my life up to be a dream catcher for gold, right? Like I'm always mining for gold, which is one of the reasons why I like talking to Shaun and hearing Shaun talk, is because I'm just constantly picking tidbits out of people and who I talk to. And so like I have a friend, he was like, yeah, I'm always, I spend an hour a day looking for creative inspiration. And I was like, man, my whole day, even talking to normal humans, is just like, what'd you say? Why was that so cool? Because so often somebody will say something and it's really easy to breeze by it. Like yesterday, someone goes, man, you guys must really love going to DC. I don't live near DC, but I go to DC all the time. I do live near it, but not close enough where it's a pain in the butt. And I said, well, if you don't go to the place, you don't do the thing. And so it struck me. To me, it's and this is another, me thing, is like everything's deep to me. And that's something I finally landed on this year. Is like I used to really fight with myself because people would be like, it's not that deep. And I'm like, but it is. And then I realized when I talk to, again, people like Shaun, I know Drew's been on here a bunch of times and everything else. I don't have a single friend or person that I envy, like, or want to be around who just goes, it's not that deep. It is that deep for every single one of them. And so for me, that was a very deep statement, because it was like, she was like, oh, it's, you guys must love going. I don't love going here, but this is where the action is. This is where I have to be in order to do the thing, whatever that is. And I find that for everything, right? It's the reason why I'm constantly on planes to wherever, hunting in Africa, Australia last year, in Indonesia, doing random stuff, and whatever comes this year, I'm going to say yes to. I don't even know. But the point is in order, in order to get there, you gotta have to be a part of it. And that's, I think, my larger why. All the smaller whys are starting to fall off. So I kind of wanted to say that just because I love how Shaun's like, why? But then at the same time, there's a part of me that's just like, I could care less. I just want to do the thing. And I think, like I said, because on the backside, I know the person I was at the beginning of my hunting trip in Australia is not the person I was at the end of it. And we all know that. We've all heard the quote, right? Like, no man crosses the same river twice, or whatever. But again, once you can be in it and really in it, see and feel and change. And, you know, I had a conversation recently with my ex-wife where she brought up a point I made back in the day. And I was like, I don't feel like that anymore. Wait, stop, pause. I was like, I've changed. You know, my position has evolved. And so I just think that that's worth the biggest why in the world. And I will also admit too, I'm a random enthusiast. I would never call myself a dabbler. I like to go deep and do things really hard. I powerlifted for a long time. I bodybuild, I build things, I got into carpentry. I've done all these random things, which has enabled me to have a grasp and a view of the world that a lot of people don't. And it's allowed me to go into a lot of, I'll call them communities and niches that where I speak differently and I get to learn differently because of it. But I do understand like what you're saying as well, Shaun, because that's one of those things where, and again, I'll use it from a powerlifting standpoint. Like I'm like, you can't call yourself a powerlifter if you've never competed, right? You can't call yourself a marathoner if you never ran a marathon. I don't care if you ran 26.2 miles on your own 17 times. Like you got to have a qualifying time or whatever it is. And so I don't know. I just think it's a thing that's important, man. Like being a random enthusiast, because it took me a long time to come to grips with that. Because I was like, man, am I just somebody who just can't commit? And then I was like, I just like learning.
Well, let me ask you a question on that then, because I have a thought and I want to kind of flesh it out with you guys. So it seems like you guys are talking about seizing the day, really being seizing a challenge, whatever that challenge is. So Alana, we were talking earlier, and you were saying that you had perhaps have trouble finding that time to stop, to allow yourself to be in a moment or not be on the next thing. And I wonder if that really is what seizing the day is to find whatever that challenge is, whether it be climbing the mountain, whether it be running the marathon, whether it be sitting quietly with yourself, and really honing on that rather than just seizing the day. Like, oh, it's a beautiful day outside, I'm going to go for a walk. It's like whatever the challenge is in the moment and latching onto it and just, I'm thinking like a pit bull, just like, nah, and never letting it go, just wrestling with it. Alana, what do you think?
Yeah, I would agree. I think Hans says, listening to you, I've never met you before, and listening to you, I kind of knew you had a problem with why. Like I picked it up really early on in the conversation that there's an issue with why here. And I think I mentioned it a couple of times and tried to come back and say purpose or other words, but I think that it's that motivate. What is it that's motivating you every single day? It might just be the chase, it might just be the hunt, but having those purposes, for me, it's like I know there's people that need help, that need me, but it's also my distraction to an extent that I'll wake up every single day and I'm ready to jump out of bed and move forward and do the things I need to do and know that there's people needing help. And Dean said to me the other day, he was like, that's your healing, isn't it? That you heal through helping other people, but you're constantly distracting yourself from actually going deep with yourself. And I was like, shh, I'm doing this thing here. And then I kind of sat down and I thought, actually, that's really true, that I don't ever just go deep within myself, because this is my healing, that like helping other people and doing things, that is almost like my focus and my purpose. And maybe one day I'll go to that side and do the little self-help stuff. But I said, Dina, this is more of my healing. But I think that for me, I'm in the exact same position there, that the small talk drives me crazy. If you want to sit down and speak to me about the weather or about, PTA or some other issue, it'll drive me absolutely insane. I need you to talk deep with me. Like, let's talk about fixing world problems and about, like, are we going to like end slavery? Are we going to like free the kids? Are we going to do this stuff? I'm not really interested in this, but we have to go deep. And actually it was something that I was speaking about the other day. I've never been a big, like, I'm not a big drinker or anything, but there's some people that I can only really be around if I'm having a drink, because I almost feel like I have to go down to that level to an extent. And I heard something with Mark Manson, and that was his reason for deciding to stop drinking, was he realized that he was almost drinking to be able to associate with certain types of conversations or certain types of people and keep that conversation flowing, because it really wasn't stimulating him. And I thought, yeah, I do that sometimes. I'll maybe get into that level. And I thought, well, actually, what if I don't? Will that change my social circles? Will things change? And yeah, it does. If you can be in the level of head that doesn't need an alcoholic drink or a stimulation of another way, then you see your circles will start to change too. And I think that when I read Way of the Samurai, I think that helped me a little bit as well, in the way that I can I don't need to do 2-3 hour meditations or going on long trips. Sometimes I can just go boom, like get myself into the thing and then go. That's how I work. Some people need that longer stretch. I just go into it and onto the next bit. So again, I think that's an everybody different type of thing, or how we're going to be in the present and be in the moment, is that I can just switch on and I'm in that moment, and this is how I'm working, and this is how I'm doing life, and it works well for me. But those were a couple of things I picked up from what you guys were saying.
Love it. Hanse, got any thoughts?
Yeah, that's big for me. The drinking one is one I learned a long time ago, right? And as I just realized that, like, or here's a better way to say it. I heard it on Chris Williamson's podcast. I think he said there's a difference between couch friends and treadmill friends, right? And he's like, you have a couch friend, after you spend time with him, you just want to spend time on the couch. Like, oh God, I'm exhausted. And you have treadmill friends that when you're done with them, you're like, let's run. We have to do something right now. And I think that's one of the things I noticed when I stopped drinking, and then I stopped associating myself with certain types of just thought patterns and people, the ones that I can get away from, at least. So that was one of the big things. And I'd say the other thing is, like, and I hear the same thing from everybody. I think I just am nitpicky. I'm very nitpicky with certain words. Especially like with you, Alana, like, you have a purpose that's so much larger that's the driving why. And that's kind of my thing too. It's just the smaller whys don't matter to me. And I also know the smaller whys don't matter to me, because the more I've said yes to things, the more I've grown in a way that I didn't know existed. Right. We were hanging out with a bunch of businessmen. I think it was 2 years ago. And these guys speak a different language than me. Right. And I call it thought mapping. And I say, the way I talk about it is like, everybody has different map, right? My map might have highways, byways. Some guys got trails. Some guys got everything, right? Well, their map, when it came to business, was just laid out. They had all the things. And what I learned when I was hanging out with them is, like, I got to take a little piece of their map and put it on mine. It's like a new overlay now. Like, I'm looking at Shaun's map in the background. All of a sudden I had new overlays and new trails that I could run and walk through, because I didn't have that before. And so for me, the more I say yes, the more I do these things that maybe don't make any sense, right? I can start to determine if I ever want to go back down that road again. 2, I started learning new things that I could apply in different areas. And so for me, I think that's one of the reasons, as well as why it's kind of gotten out the window, because the real why is I'm just trying to figure it out. I'm just trying to learn. I just want to, and then learn for the purpose of, when I do run across this young man who's 26, or another guy who's on his second act and he's 39, 40, 42, and he's just trying to figure it out, I have another way to talk to him that's not just, hey man, get in the gym, real helpful guy. You just got to want it more. Like, all those things. And so I just think that's one of the things. And the thing I just to say it out loud, because you said it, I think is interesting, and I had to do it. I think the best medicine in the world is to help. Right. When I went through my whole situation, I did not get better until I started helping. Period. I was lucky enough and unfortunate enough at the same time to be alone. I was contracting back and forth downrange. And so my journal was my best friend. So I had to kind of go internal. I had to go inside. So as I'm helping, and then I come back and internalize and figure out and, learn myself, which I think is the best gift you can give yourself, is to really, like, understand what the internal tickings are and everything else. But I will say this as well, is worth saying out loud for everyone. Every time you go internal, it's like cleaning a house. There's a dusty corner that's going to kick some stuff up. That's going to make a mess. Right. And I don't think most people realize that when they either start therapy or they start, asking themselves some really serious questions. It's like, oh, I'm just going to clean this house. And it's like, good luck, buddy. Get around that back door and going to kick some stuff up, and it's going to be a hard one. But I mean, the hard ones actually make good days, and I think that's it's agrodolce. So it's food, right? Like it's one of my favorite things. We can't have sweet without the sour. And so that's the other thing, is like really embracing all that. Talking about seize the day. I think that's the two things I'm saying before I shut up is the shorthanded for me is called no anesthesia, right? I want to feel every piece of pain I have. And it took me a long time to get there. But I want to feel that because, and one, it makes all the good stuff that much better, right? And it's also the lesson that I get. I make sure that lesson's cemented in there. And so, I think that's part of seizing the day. And I think the last thing is just the intention, man, because we were saying like, it's like going hard, but there's also the intention, man. Some days are just throwaway days, right? Like I tell my kids on Sundays do nothing day. Sunday's a day, you guys want to get on your tablet and do nothing? Cool. That's your day to do it. You want to sit on the bed and put your hand behind your head. So I find my son the other day, his hands behind his head, legs crossed. And I was like, what's he doing? And I was like, oh, I do that. So, but that's our day. And it's the intention behind the day. The day is do whatever you want. Not, oh my God, the day got away from me.
Yeah.
Right. And I think that's the important thing is like, if you're really talking about seizing the day, it's like, that's fine. Those days should be built in. It's a deload day. It's a training. It's an easy training day. They have to be in there sometimes, but it's just when it's not intentional. And next thing you know, you've been doom scrolling for 5 hours and you just wasted it. And you're like, it's nothing. There's nothing better. That
day will disappear in a heartbeat if you let it. And I think it's definitely part of this. It's a big part of this conversation. Shaun, got any thoughts?
So many, but we don't have the time. I'll drop into this and simply say that when I entered into this podcast, I was thinking about seize the day / seize the podcast. That's how I think. I was here to seize this podcast. I was here to give it my best effort. I was here to listen, absorb, learn, and then say whatever freaky little thing that pops into my head that the universe gives me. However this all works. But I'm in it to win it. I'm in it to win the podcast. And I'm not talking about beating my friends. I'm talking about winning it in my way, in a way that makes me believe, makes me know that I'm being true to who I am, that I am freaking ferociously in this podcast, even though it might look like I'm just chillaxing and kicking back and listening. How you engage in this moment, in this podcast, in the next thing that you do. How you do one thing is how you do everything. And so if you want to seize the day, you've got to seize the moment that you're in order to understand what the day can feel like, the month, the year, the life. And so I feel that if too much of a top-down view, too much of a seize the day mentality can preclude you from seizing the second, seizing right now.
Bam. I love that. With that, let's go around and get some quick final thoughts, and then we can shut her down for the afternoon. This has been an absolutely fantastic podcast. And to Shaun's point, I think I've won today already. So just being a part of this and hearing all this stuff, it has been illuminating. I'm just loving it. Alana, you got any final points? Anything still burning in the back of your brain?
Yeah, I think that Shaun just ended it really nicely there with seize the day, but seize the moment. I think that before this call, I had something really huge going on. After this call, I've got something really huge going on. But in this podcast, in this moment, this was about this podcast. It was about your podcast chance. It was about coming together on the collective and being here. And anytime that you do message, I'm like, yeah, let's book that time and do it, because it's always really inspiring, and it's always really, there's always something thought-provoking comes from it. And just in the last thing that Hansi said there was that there's always going to be a million excuses. It's what the intention is like. And I think we could all say that we could pick up the phone and say that screen time was way too much last week, so all those excuses are made for the other thing that I didn't do we could just forget that because you were on the phone. So having those like really good intentions and being present in that moment, seizing that moment, is exactly how we could do with all being a bit more focused on. And I've thoroughly enjoyed the last few hours. So thank you.
It's always a pleasure hanging out with you. Always. Hanse, you got any final thoughts before we shut her down?
Yeah, if I can read, I'm going to read a quote if you don't mind.
Give her.
Just because I think framing is super impossible. It's super important when it comes to perspective, seize the day, the whole thing, right? And I like this quote a lot. It says, sometimes you just want to stand in the corner and stare out the window. The problem is when you're not smoking and staring out the window, you're an antisocial, friendless idiot. If you stand and stare out of the window with a cigarette, you're an effing philosopher. The power of reframing things cannot be overstated. And so I just think that's important. It's fun, man. It's you can frame something as like it's this huge thing. Shaun said it earlier, man. Kilimanjaro is a stroll, or Kilimanjaro is a big deal. So the framing of how you seize the day or how you look at life, I had a call the other day where I was telling a guy I romanticized the hell out of my life. I think if you're a guy with PTSD and all the other things, I was like, I think that's a huge part of making life good, man, is like you have to romanticize it. And that's part of framing. I just reframe everything where the power of choice is really important.
Could not agree more. Shaun, any final thoughts?
Sure thing. I'm going to end off with how I started off. I'm just going to read the quote, the actual complete quote from Carpe Diem, which is Carpe Diem, quam minimum credula postero, which again means seize the day, comma, putting as little trust as possible in the future. The future is unknown. The past is gone. The present is now. And that's all you got. You can dream your little dreams, but try to live them today, in this moment, in the second. It's living in the moment that creates the dream. Don't dilute your energy by living too much in the future.
I got nothing to add. This has just been fantastic. I love this conversation. Thank you guys again. I will just say that as we all continue to learn, build, and grow, we'll see y'all next week.
Chimo.
Thanks everybody for watching and being part of the collective. If this has sparked any thoughts or resonated with you, let us know in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share. Your support helps us grow and keeps the conversation going. We'll see y'all next time.